Hey folks, welcome to this incredible facility. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to tour this place tomorrow. It's like a little regenerative haven in the middle of Belgium. So thanks for hosting us here. Are you guys able to hear me? Is that coming through? So my name's Rob Avis. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm co-founder of Fifth World and a member of the DAO. And today we're going to be talking about this concept of regenerative network states. So we live in this tech era right now where every day new technology comes out and tries to amaze us or amazes us, depending on what the tech actually is. But I read a book several years ago by a gentleman named Spencer Wells called Pandora's Seed. And he made the argument in there that one of the most important technological revolutions that humanity has ever. So yeah, Spencer Wells basically wrote this book called Pandora's Seed, and it's a fascinating read. And he argued that one of the most important technological advancements humans have ever made was the decision to plant seeds. So when the Younger Dryas happened, which was the last major ice age, humans, some archaeologists, or anthropologists I should say, speculate that there was as little as 1,200 humans living on Earth during that period. And humans were forced to grow their own food. Well, it looks like it's not the computers, it's the television. And so humans were forced to basically start propagating their own food in order to stay alive. And so this is a massive technological advancement that allowed our species to continue to occupy this planet. And so we could say it was a state change in how humans operated on planet Earth. Because before that, we were subject to whatever food we could actually gain access to. And food ultimately is just a form of energy. But in doing that, we ended up kind of finding a feedback loop or basically a feedback loop that allowed us, when we grew more food, we had more humans. And so that started off kind of humans. Are you able to see that now? There we go. That started off this feedback loop that started allowing us to grow more humans. And more humans grew more humans. And as we grew as a species, we started to learn new things. And interestingly enough, humans have basically followed a similar pattern over the last 10,000 years, which is deforest, plow, and desertify. But the time period that started in the Younger Dryas up until basically today, the feedback mechanism with regards to how we affected our ecosystems was so long that we were unable to see the damage that we were causing. And we're starting to see those issues now. And you can see on this chart that various technological advancements basically created state changes in how humans existed on this planet. Most interesting right now is the Industrial Revolution, which we're maybe coming to the end of, maybe we're transforming, maybe it's turning into something different. We're certainly hoping that that's the case at Fifth World and VDAO. And the Industrial Revolution actually started with the discovery of how to turn stored energy into mechanical power. And it really ended up getting jet fuel when we discovered oil. Now, most people don't realize this, but 1 barrel of oil is roughly equivalent to 25,000 hours of man labor. Each and every one of us has an exogenous energy consumption of about 11,000 watts. So 1 incandescent light, which is how we used to light our houses, used to have 100 watts, just to put that in perspective. The human body consumes about 100 watts of energy, but in order to operate in our modern lifestyle, we need about 11,000 watts as a Western civilian to operate in this society. Now that energy goes into the way we grow our food. Every calorie of food that we consume right now takes 20 to 30 calories of hydrocarbon energy to produce. And every business that operates under this understanding that there is an unlimited amount of energy to do whatever activities are required. And most of us are completely energy blind. Now, with the advent or the discovery and utilization of oil, we also ended up having these really intelligent people, Watt, Otto, and Diesel, who figured out how to turn this energy into motive force. So that was the discovery of the engine and the steam engine. Now, we're now looking back in history and saying these devices are causing tons of unfunded external liabilities. CO2 in the atmosphere. Before we had unleaded gasoline, we were putting lead into the atmosphere with leaded gasoline. But there were actually significant benefits to humanity, obviously. I flew here a couple of days ago on a 60,000 horsepower jet, which allows me to be here. So fossil fuels are absolutely incredible in what they can do. They've created a lot of benefits in humanity. They've allowed us to connect in ways that we weren't able to do before. And this is one of the first benefits that was realized as a result of the discovery of oil and the discovery of how to turn that oil into motive force. This is not something that's thought about too often, but in 1894, just prior to that, as cities started to grow, they started having massive horse manure problems. In fact, New York City is designed with stairs on most of the apartments, the walk-up apartments, because those stairs were required to go up to a second floor in order to accommodate for all the horse manure that was accumulating in the cities. And so as the engine came into existence and we were able to use cars, we were able to start to move around without the use of horses, meaning that horse manure was no longer left everywhere and we weren't living in squalor, basically. With that came improved sanitation, there were less flies moving around, and so fossil fuels actually did propel humanity forward in very positive ways. We're just starting to realize some of the downsides of that fossil energy, and we have to start moving forward into a new state change, which is where most of our minds are going these days. Later in the century, we ended up with the Green Revolution, which is really just a PR campaign for the fertilizer and pesticide companies. And so prior to the discovery of the Haber-Bosch process and synthetic nitrogen fertilizers and herbicides, farms were basically fertilized with animal manure, which was labor intensive and required farmers to actually operate polycultural systems so that they could actually grow the fertilizer that was required in order to grow the food, similar to what's actually going on in this facility, actually. So fish poop in water, that fish water is then used to feed plants. Farms used to operate in the exact same way, except it was a soil-based system. And allowing or discovering how to turn natural gas into fossil fertilizers allowed farms to basically move to monoculture-based systems and increase productivity dramatically. But as a result of that, we ended up with the Silent Spring. Rachel Carson talked about that. Soil erosion, biodiversity loss, groundwater contamination, all liabilities that we're dealing with right now. And we're starting to see people addressing this through things like regenerative farming and permaculture, which is what I've been doing for the last 15 years. But again, I think it's important, it's easy to look at these systems and criticize them, but I think it's important to recognize that these are all steps upon our human evolutionary journey. And we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We should look at these technological advancements and say, what are the places with which these advancements and these learnings fit within a new system? Some of them may not fit, but we shouldn't allow the pendulum to necessarily swing all the way to the other side. We should look at it more objectively and figure out how we can use these tools in a new version of humanity. The information revolution is one of the most recent step changes that we're seeing, and so we're really seeing humanity move into this almost hive mind as a result of the interconnectedness of the internet. And my background is mostly in thermodynamics and biology, and so I look at the internet and all of the information that travels along the internet in the same way that I would look at mycelium in the soil. And I'm going to talk about that today in my workshop this afternoon, which I think is at 3:30. And we're actually going to do an exercise as a community of individuals to actually create our own mycelial web that's similar to the internet and very similar to a mycelium system. This is allowing ideas and information to travel across mass distances, and I don't need to talk to you guys about that because you're probably all of this community, but it's opening up all sorts of new opportunities that we could have never thought possible. And the example that I like to think about, which I'll talk more about this afternoon, is that when a tree gets inoculated by mycelium, that mycelium, which is basically the root system of fungus, can increase the surface area of roots by up to 800 times. So a tree can get access to a certain amount of nutrient, a certain amount of water, but when it gets connected into a mycelial web, its surface area increases by 800-fold. And I really see the internet as an analogous symbiotic system that we can connect into ourselves, the way that we interact with each other. But I suspect that the internet increases our surface area on planet Earth by more than 800 times. And the goal for VDAO and Fifth World is to figure out how to leverage those network dynamics in a way that allow us to regenerate planet Earth. So we're facing a polycrisis. We don't need to talk a lot about this. I'm sure it's all on your mind. It's in every newspaper. The statement that every one of these articles describe is that, which you've probably never put words to, is that humans are inherently destructive. And I would argue that we can be just as positive as we are negative. One of the things with the meta-crisis and polycrisis is that we've got two different camps that are trying to lead us in different directions. So in one camp, we've got more government and more coordination, which is potentially leading towards centralized dystopia. And in the other camp, we've got this libertarian movement, which is saying, stay off my land, don't tell me what to do, which will lead to the tragedy of the commons. And one of the missions that we have at VDAO is to figure out how to thread that needle and get the best of coordination and the best of liberty and freedom without ending up in the gutter. And so, where do we go from here? And I would argue that we need a new paradigm. And I've kind of already hinted at this, but there's three paradigms that we've identified. The first one is the degenerative paradigm, which is humans are on the top of all systems. And it's this idea that we are inherently destructive. So the Earth is it's our domain, we can do whatever we want with it. Everything that sits below us is ours to do with whatever we deem suitable. And we can kind of see the direction that the degenerative paradigm is taking us. It's definitely net negative. The sustainable paradigm, which is kind of what's described in all of these climate change articles, is a net loss, zero-sum game, basically, where we're at the bottom of a system. Everything else above us is better than us. And if you kind of draw that out to its logical conclusion, humans are not of this earth, and we're net negative and net destructive. But we are really promoting this idea that we are actually of nature, and we can be just as positive as we are negative. And in the same way that a beaver will cut down a forest, dam up a creek or a river, and I've got 6 beaver families living on my farm in Canada right now, by cutting all those trees down and creating disturbance, they're actually increasing the background biodiversity on my farm by over 28-fold. And so if the most destructive thing we've done as humans is the nuclear bomb, what's the most positive? How can we turn our life energy into one of regeneration? And so this is the concept of regenerative living. And so we're coming out of this state change where we scaled as a species in a centralized way. Crypto is taking us towards a decentralized future, and we're arguing that regenerative living actually takes us even further to a distributed future, where all of us have the ability to generate our own food, energy, water, and shelter in a way that is net positive for all living things on planet Earth. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And so regenerative living is high tech, because technology is a part of being human. We build tools. High nature, because we need nature to coexist on this planet. And high humanity, because community is a central aspect of being humans on this earth. And so that's cool. What can we do? Marc.
Thank you. Hey guys, my name is Marc. My name is Marc. I'm the CEO of Fifth World and Rob's co-founder at Fifth World, also a member of VDAO. It's interesting, actually, when I was hearing Angelo talk, I realized Build was started at East Denver, which is actually the case with VDAO too. So funny coincidence. Another fun fact, Angela and I used to live in the same building in New Jersey, which is another like weird coincidence. Let's see how that goes, but yeah, just thought of mentioning it. So yeah, so what can we do? And I think what Rob touched on is this idea of regenerative living, where we're taking the crypto mission, right, of decentralizing basically money issuance and assets and data, and also thinking through, all right, like along with the digital side of things, how can we decentralize physical infrastructure? And that's already happening, right? Like when you see the amount of adoption when it comes to solar energy at the level of the household, distributed energy systems, microgrids, battery systems, it's kind of happening on the energy side. I think it's not happening as much on the water side and the food side, and we'll touch on it a little bit more. But just to make the concept a little bit more concrete, we thought about actually talking about like what can we do? Like what does this mean actually to, you know, adopt a regenerative living mindset, or to actually live in a regenerative way versus the way we pretty much, you know, I guess most of us live today. And in our opinion, like there are three main intervention points which are really easily accessible to most people today. And I'll be talking about each one of those in the next slides, but it's basically about education, feedback, and coordination. And so on the education side, I think when we look at, you know, all those articles coming up about climate change, environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, and even like things that have to do with our lifestyle, right? Like low nutrient density food, you know, the loneliness epidemic, as they call it. It all seems like these are very big problems, and the solutions for these problems have to be top down, right? Coming from governments or corporations. But the reality is there are so many things we can do bottom up today. And that's really what VDAO is about and what we're trying to do in terms of, you know, building our community. And the starting point when it comes to bottom-up change is really, you know, raising awareness and educating people about the fact that, first of all, it's a choice, it's a mindset change, and that's really important. But second of all, like literally the way we say in crypto, you can be your own bank, you can actually, you know, start effecting change by, you know, growing your own food in your own backyard, or maybe planting a tree in your backyard, or setting up a solar panel. And these are things that are super accessible today. And at Fifth Word, we have an education platform, and you know, Rob founded this platform 20 years ago, and we ended up bringing it into Fifth World. And we see it every day. Like when people take some of the courses we teach, they learn a lot of like skills and things they, you know, they can apply to their daily lives. But more importantly, they go through this mindset shift of understanding that, well, it's not really rocket science. Like there are so many solutions out there. And it's really about, number one, you know, making the choice, but number two, figuring out how to collaborate and coordinate, which is basically, I think, what the crypto ecosystem is all about. And so I think one of the things Rob and I talk about a lot is that I come from a tech background. I'm an electrical and computer engineer. So I'm kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum compared to Rob, you know, like thermodynamics and mechanical. And it's so interesting because people who think about things from a mechanical, you know, thermodynamics perspective are typically, you know, data blind or, you know, asset blind in the sense of they don't think too much about trust in financial system, you know, trust in banks, all of that. But then someone like me who's, you know, that's the financial stuff are top of mind, the data stuff are top of mind. I'm actually, or at least I was before I met Rob, energy blind in the sense that I didn't really used to think too much about like, you know, why is energy so cheap, or where does energy come from? Why is food so cheap, and where does food come from, and all of these things. And I think that's also an important element of education, like raising awareness around energy blindness and food blindness, and, you know, the whole idea of figuring out how to become more autonomous, but also more net positive when it comes to our ecosystems and nature. The second intervention point is measuring and providing feedback. How many of you guys have a Fitbit or a Whoop or a Garmin? Awesome. I actually, don't laugh at me, I actually have two of them right now, Garmin and Whoop. I was peer pressured to buy a Whoop and try it out, so I'm going through that exercise right now. But it's quite impressive, right? Like when you start seeing your, you know, body metrics on a daily basis, it's just like the feedback loop kicks in and you start obsessing around how can you optimize basically your health, your sleep, your exercise, all of that. The other aspect of it, if you've been to a SoulCycle class or any of the cycling classes really, or cardio classes, it's the competition that happens, right, among people in that class as they look at the dashboard and see their data and really try to kind of compete and come out on top. And we believe the same thing needs to happen when it comes to our ecosystem and Earth, in the sense that we have a lot of technology today that allow us to measure ecosystem metrics, biodiversity metrics, even energy, consumption metrics and production metrics and all of that. And we almost need like a Whoop or a Fitbit or a Garmin for planet Earth to be able to understand like what are the things that we're doing and how are they affecting our ecosystems negatively or positively, and how can we do things that can optimize for the positive side and really reduce the negative side. And we call this typically like negative externalities and positive externalities. And this is actually a very growing industry. There are so many companies trying to tackle the MRV topic when it comes to the carbon industry. There are so many companies today also trying to branch out of carbon and think through just in general ecosystem metrics and biodiversity metrics. We have satellite technology that can allow us to measure a lot of things. Some interesting crypto projects related to GNSS and RTK and decentralizing almost GPS navigation systems. Some other crypto projects doing it bottom up in the sense of like using mesh networks to figure out how to do the same thing, but more from a bottom up perspective. So there's a lot of things that can be done here, and obviously the crypto layer allows for adding this layer of incentivization to be able to measure and provide feedback, and even to be able to change course and get rewarded for doing that. And then the last thing, which I think most of you guys are probably familiar with here, which is like, the concept of online coordination and collaboration. And I would say not just online, actually, but online and in real life. If you're a Star Trek fan, you probably should know what this ship here is called. Any guesses? The Discovery spaceship. And the reason we wanted to show this example here is because, first of all, like it's a good kind of metaphor for innovation and discovery. But second of all, this ship is actually powered by the mycelium drive, going back to mycelium, which is a good kind of science fiction example of tech and nature merging together. The idea here really is that if you look at the internet, right, and you think about, if you go back to the moment before something like Facebook started, collaboration used to happen primarily based on geographic proximity, right? Even community building used to happen at the level of the geography. And what the internet did over the past 20 or 25 years is that it really changed that from, first of all, being able to collaborate and coordinate with your friends online, and then after that, being able to collaborate and coordinate with complete strangers online. And the best like proxy for that is actually the gaming industry, right? Like, I'm sure you guys know about a lot of stories of like gamers meeting online and becoming friends and, becoming actually close friends for years before actually meeting in person. And in general, like things like gaming are precursors to like what could happen in other industries outside of gaming. So we have the tools today to not only collaborate online, but to pull in money online, right? And to figure out how can we deploy this money or those assets into things that are either virtual or in real life and do things about it. And that's kind of the main idea behind starting VDAO for us, which is like this concept that we want to figure out what sort of solutions can we build at the intersection of regenerative living, this idea of using high tech, but also high nature and high community or high humanity. And then self-custody of bits and atoms, right? Crypto is all about self-custody of bits, but there's also a lot of other tools and technologies that have to do with the self-custody of atoms and decentralization of physical infrastructure. Some of it has to do with permaculture, some of it has to do with distributed energy systems, and so on and so on. And lastly, anti-fragility and resilience. And we believe that's a very important point because the paradigm we've been operating under throughout maybe the past 100 years or even more has been a paradigm of growth focusing on one metric really, which is financial growth and efficiency. And this served us well for a while, but we're realizing now that just focusing on this linear way of thinking leads to so many other negative externalities when it comes to the environment, societal externalities, and things like that, which I guess some people call the meta crisis or the poly crisis. And we believe we have to move into a paradigm that focuses on growth, but also anti-fragility and resilience. And so how can we grow in a more decentralized, anti-fragile, resilient way is really what we're trying to answer at VDAO. And the way we're thinking about this is through combining basically those two layers on the right side, global coordination, right? But also bottom-up solutions. So translating highly aligned communities that can form online into local communities in physical location that can actually do things. And we focus a lot on community building, but also on figuring out how can we get those local communities to pull in capital to buy land, to do stuff with the land, whether it's regenerate the land or build their own regenerative houses, or just figure out what sort of lifestyle they want to adopt through buying the land or doing stuff there, or even just in general through collaboration and things that that community could be doing. And so we spoke about so far, in general, where we are, in terms of the state, I guess, of the world and, human evolution, and where we believe we should be going in terms of mindset and paradigm shift. And then how we can start really by, figuring out, first of all, making a choice, but also figuring out what sort of things you can really start within your own community or even at the level of your own household. But we also want to talk about what do we believe the end vision here is, and this ties back to, I guess, the topic of this conference, right? In terms of what are regenerative network states. And what I want to do here is just I want to imagine a little bit what our houses could look like versus how they are today, right? So our houses today are basically more of a passive asset, right? And in fact, Rob told me this, but the word mortgage comes from French, right? And it's mortgage, which basically means a debt pledge. And that's already a very negative way of thinking about the place you wanna be living, right, for the majority of your life. And so imagine you actually can build a house in a way that your house can generate its own energy through solar or wind or whatever combination of renewable energy you want to use, can have its own water security through either rainwater harvesting or any other sorts of water management systems, can grow its own food, right, whether it's through a passive solar greenhouse or a food forest or a market garden. Can even generate its own crypto, right? If you have a crypto mining rig or a Bitcoin mining rig in your house, and you can also actually reuse the heat generated from the mining to warm up the house or warm up the greenhouse. So you guys start getting the idea of we can actually build a lot of these things in a way that can become circular, right? In terms of reusing the waste that is generated from those systems, but also very regenerative and almost autonomous and anti-fragile in the sense that these becomes basically almost self-sustaining homes or local nodes. And the idea is not that every house should look like this. Obviously, it really depends. It's a case by case. It really depends on the context and what your needs are and all of that. But the idea is more there is nothing stopping us from actually doing this, right? From a technological standpoint, these solutions already exist and they're being used. And I guess the main blocker is probably cost at this stage for some of these items here. But electric cars 20 years ago were basically a pipe dream, right, a prototype, and were pretty expensive when Tesla first started. Today, they're probably something that everyone thinks about when they think about buying a car, right? And so we believe we are at this stage right now in terms of thinking through how to adopt regenerative systems in terms of our basically in our daily lives. And the last thing I would add here, especially for the hackathon guys, is that you can literally think about, you can explore different token-based solutions or incentives for people to adopt those systems, right? So you think about solar, you can think through, all right, what's a token-based system incentive that I can give people to start actually adopting solar at a faster rate? Same thing for water systems, food systems, and so on and so on. So, take this house and then think about a collection of these houses in a way that forms a neighborhood. And now you have an autonomous regenerative community. And the idea here is that we can even, take it one step higher and start rethinking a little bit how we design neighborhoods or, suburban areas or even rural areas in a way that takes into account and embraces using those regenerative systems. And so when I said earlier that you can grow your own food in your backyard, not everyone wants to do that, right? I don't think I have the time or even the skill set to do that myself. But then you can also, have a community urban farm or a community greenhouse and contribute in different ways for your community or your neighborhood to have that level of autonomy and basically really sovereignty over, your food. It's also a lifestyle piece, right? Like, obviously, there is a huge interest today for all of us to eat better and to eat organic food and nutrient, dense food, and in general, just to be clean when it comes to the environment. And so we think about those neighborhood and communities as, great places to live in the sense that it's, it's connected to nature, it's high tech, it's convenient, it's a place of well-being and health. But then also in times of global instability, when something like, COVID happened, it's also a safe haven in a way, right? Because it has its own level of self-sufficiency when it comes to food production, energy production, water production, and more importantly, it has a strong community, right? And that's something that, especially in our world today, with all the technology and basically the dopamine hits that we get from all the different social media tools that we use, being part of a community or having this personal human interaction is so key. And so that's kind of how we think if we start from the level of the household and move into the level of the neighborhood, of the community, we can really start really bottom up and start building it up. And finally, to tie it up together, oh, I missed the slide, but just to give you guys an example, that's already being done, right? Like we know of a couple of examples around the world where those communities exist. This example is in Dubai. It's called Sustainable City. It's basically 500 residential units, 11 greenhouses, solar panels everywhere. It's a car-free neighborhood, so you have to like park your car and you can commute inside using electric bikes or scooters or even walking. And it's a really interesting example of what can be done. There are a couple of examples in the US also, and I'm sure there's a bunch of them in Europe. Still, I guess, niche to a certain point, but in our opinion, we don't think there is a reason we couldn't actually start thinking seriously about having those types of communities and structures. And finally, as we build multiple autonomous regenerative communities all around the world, these communities, through things like the internet or even crypto, primarily crypto in my opinion, can become a network by itself, right? You can start thinking about community currencies, monetary diversity, right? The same way people think about biodiversity when it comes to agriculture or nature, monetary diversity is something we don't really think about a lot when it comes to our monetary systems, and it's actually very key to have anti-fragile financial systems. Just in general, economic exchanges or networks across those different communities that are spread out all over the world. And that's really what we mean by regenerative network states. It's basically a network of interconnected communities that are, they have their own regenerative systems when it comes to energy, food, water, and even data, and are able to collaborate at the global level with actual physical presence in, several areas all around the world. And with that, I'm going to end on this quote that I really like, which says, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence have the capacity to shift the entire system. And that's really how we think about things in terms of the mission we're trying to work towards. We can really start by small things, bottom up, combine the physical and the digital in terms of like figuring out what sorts of like crypto solutions, data solutions can incentivize online coordination and collaboration, but also what sorts of like actual physical solutions can we implement in local communities and work towards a more decentralized and anti-fragile future. And all it takes is like one or two examples. And I think if it's successful, the idea is people will start to copy it. And for us, that's actually a measure of success. So thank you. I'm not sure if we have Q&A time, but I'll leave it with Angelo.
We could take maybe 2 or 3 questions. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys, both of you, for your explanation of your vision. Really like also what you mentioned, that actual fossil fuels were advancement for society, just like I think agricultural technology was a huge advancement, especially after World War II. What I would want to like, I think the vision resonates with a lot of people here. It's what we hear. Like, what exactly does VDAO like do in all this? Like,
Yeah.
are you guys already building, constructing already sites like this, or what, are you financing them, or what do you do?
Yeah, I can take this. So VDAO right now is a DAO being incubated by Fifth Word, which is the company we're from. We're focusing primarily right now on community building. So we have like four main objectives that we're working towards as part of building the community. One is bringing in people that are really kind of highly aligned with what we're trying to do and kind of with the mission. Spreading awareness and education. So we do a lot of like launch and learns, community workshops, those type of things around what it means to actually decentralize physical systems. Like how can you actually implement a solar system? How can you actually build your own greenhouse? Those type of things. We focus a lot on building, that's the second goal, we focus a lot on building a strong social fabric in the sense of like getting people to meet up, do like just kind of social events, gathering events, things like that. And then the last piece is, or like the third piece is what we call rolling out V community hubs. So the DAO is basically kind of, think about it as like the marketplace where like, people meet and collaborate online. But then out of this, what's happening now is that local communities are kind of emerging where people who live in certain areas are actually coming together and starting with meeting up, but ideally, eventually figuring out how to do stuff together. So one example is we have a group in New Jersey who, one of the guys has a piece of land and is thinking through, I want to donate the land to the DAO and I want the people who live in the Jersey area to actually come and, we want to figure out together what to do with the land. Like, should we build a farm? Should we do like a small, cabin style retreat where you have like all sorts of like regenerative systems, that type of thing. The vision for the V Community Hubs is ultimately for people to actually pull in capital to do something with it. We're not there yet. We still need to like figure out how to do that, and we need to, we basically, the way we think about these things is that we don't have the answers. We're working with the community to figure out what the best answers are. The last piece I would say is if you go back to the house that we showed, the regenerative house, there are so many like token-based incentives that we can build around getting people to adopt those systems. And so that's kind of the fourth goal in the sense that we're ideating different like token solutions, whether it's like a solar token or a water token or a tree token to get people to implement those systems at the level of their households or the level of the house. So that's kind of the vision right now. And Fifth Word, the company incubating VDAO, has a bunch of different kind of business lines. One is we actually do a lot of land and property design and implementation for people who want to adopt those regenerative systems. We have the education platform that educates people who are more like, do it yourself. They want to learn how to do it and implement it themselves. And then we are in the early stages of fundraising to actually buy land and build kind of the first Fifth Word village, basically following the same concept. So yeah, that's kind of an overview. Yeah.
Okay, so community building is really a specific thing, and it sounds like you probably need to learn some of the lessons from like eco villages because the way you're approaching it is a good start. There's a certain way that you're speaking that I think Rob was speaking in a completely different way than you were, which was the first thing you addressed. And there is an intrinsic conflict between monetary systems and regenerative systems. Like a dead tree is worth more than a live tree. That's just the way it is. And the way that you said we're gonna have token-based systems to get people to do stuff is like, I don't want to live in a society where people are giving me a token to get me to do stuff. And it's almost the opposite of community. So monetary systems kind of kill alive things in order to make money. And tokenized systems force people to do things rather than do them because it's part of their well-being and community. So how are you bridging those conflicts? Because your speaking is like, you're speaking at opposite points.
It's a good question, yeah.
Probably Rob, because like, I don't know.
I think you start and
Yeah.
I'll fill in the gaps.
Okay. It's a very good question. The short answer is it's a work in progress. Like I don't have a final answer to your question. I have a belief, though, that these things can be at odds against each other, but they can also be used almost like a reinforcing feedback loops if they're designed correctly. And so when I said like building a token system to get people to do stuff, I didn't mean in a way that forces them to do it, but more like rewards them to do it, right? And the reality is today, because the monetary system today is very kind of linear, like you make money, you know, you get rich, that type of thinking, that's where most people go, right? Like this is where most companies actually try to optimize primarily. And so can we change that? Can we actually create other incentives that can get businesses who are primarily seeking profits to actually get incentivized to not just focus on the financial return, but on other sorts of like ecosystem return? And the idea that there is first like a mindset paradigm shift to it, but then there is also this idea of if we assign some value to those initiatives or those, I guess, goals or objective, it would make the decision for people to adopt those things easier. And that's kind of the belief we're operating under. Now, yeah, it's a very, very hard problem, right? That's why your question is such a good question. And, you know, that's kind of where I am with it. Yeah.
It's just painful to hear people say we can assign value to those things. Those things are intrinsically valuable.
I think just as like the current monetary system fails to catch that value. So if you deposit money in a bank right now, they use that money to lend it out to other industries to grow the economy, right?
That's
So you
also
deposit.
a lie. They invent the money out of the banks. But it's money
They're
doesn't
multiplied by
represent
money.
value. It's the problem.
Money is a transfer value.
No, it's not.
It is its biggest. It is a medium of exchange of value.
No, it's not. We keep saying that, but money is anti-air, it's anti-relationship, it's anti-life, and so it's not a transfer of value. The definition of money is at the core of why we killed our environment.
I think it's the most useful medium of exchange that I've ever met.
Okay, but it's outdated now.
So you want to get back to the barter system?
So,
Anyway, this is a longer story, but I'd like to hear their way of dealing with it, because money is killing trees, very clearly and very literally.
so I only have two things to add to this. One is thank you for the problem definition. I think that was lovely. And the second thing is that we're big fans of Daniel Schmachtenberger, and that's why I put the bowling alley representation there. And Gandhi said that 3/4 of the problem is actually getting the diagnosis right. And so really the DAO is essentially our answer to all of the 3-hour podcasts that Daniel Schmachtenberger puts out. At least that's one of the answers, is that we've got a lot of intelligent people in the room that are thinking this way, that have thought, we've thought deeply about some of these things, but we recognize that we're blind in other areas. And we believe that we're stronger together. So I live this life. I steward a 160-acre farm. I grow food for my family. I don't do it because I get paid to do it. And I left an oil and gas career 20 years ago where I was making a pile of money to pursue educating in permaculture for the last 20 years. And I know that when you get somebody in front of, in a permaculture design course for 2 weeks, they fundamentally change the course of their life. It happened to me. It's happened to 5,000 students that I've taught over the last 20 years. Some people are definitely aligned to doing those sorts of things. Other people need different incentives in order to start thinking in that way. I don't have all the answers, but what I have to say is that I've been embraced by the blockchain and Web3 community, who a lot of whom are thinking deeply about these problems in a completely different set of, from a completely different perspective, which is really inspiring to me because I've been thinking through the lens of biology and physics, like the atoms piece, and I've only been able to get so far doing that. And so I feel like there's something here, and I invite you guys to join us on this journey that we're on to try and figure out what that collaboration looks like between those two worlds.